day, everybody. This is Calxiyn here, and if you guys enjoyed this video, you should subscribe for more Shadows House videos. Today we are going to be watching episode 3, and I'm so excited because just based off the thumbnail alone, like Emily Co and Mia are in it, so I'm like, how's that relationship going? Now that, you know what I mean? Like, how's their friendship after that interaction from last episode? So I'm super excited to see what this episode has in store for us. Remember that you guys should subscribe, obviously, for more Shadows House videos, but if you want to support the channel and get my reaction, like my full-length reaction, you guys can pledge to the Patreon or become a YouTube membership member using the join button, and I have a link for that in the description, actually. So, basically, what that is that on Patreon, I do a you press play when I press play, like a sync up thing, right? And so you guys can see like my full-length reaction, but this is just my reaction to the biggest moments, the coolest moments, and then afterwards, we'll do a whole discussion where we break down and theorize and all that fun stuff. So I hope that you guys enjoy, and let's just get into it. Let's go! Mia looks upset with her. Oh, see, now she's acting nice. That wasn't her personality before. Oh, but is this her true personality? Oh boy, she has a lot to learn. Oh dear. The veiled dolls. Oh my god, that's what I said last week. The veiled dolls, I don't like that, sis. Oh, that's why. See, I knew that the lace was important. Yes. Right. Okay, Lou hasn't either. Okay. Oh my god, she just said that. Yeah. Okay. Oh my god, there's so much interesting things going on right now, sis. Uh-oh, that's not good. Don't worry about stuff like that. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, I don't like that. That's so suspicious. Oh, see, I was right about the wings. Oh my god, guys. Yay. See, they live in another wing of the house. Wait, why does she know that? Oh. Uh-oh. Lord of Shadows. Okay. This is like religiously culty. Oh my god, the Grand Creator. That's culty as fuck. Oh boy. Oh, so they're not supposed, those of our standing. Oh dear. Uh-oh. An emergency. Oh my god, what is happening? A phantom. Oh. Yeah, see? That's what was in Kate's room in episode 1. The soot that moves is called a scorch. Oh my god. Oh dear, that's not good. Oh my god. Do they have to go to war, sis? Oh, it's the doll. Uh-oh. Her name is Barbie? Okay. Oh my god. This is a battle anime all of a sudden. What the heck? Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah, so that was the thing that happened in Kate's room and stuff. Oh dear. Oh, she just looks so like what if they have feelings? They don't look like they look. What happened? What's happening to her? Oh my god. Guys, she's dying! Can someone help her? Oh my god! Oh, that's not good. Oh no! What the fuck? Oh my god! Oh, that's so not good! No, she must be dead! I don't like making choices! Oh no! Why? Ah! Why? Oh my god! there's something wrong with her. She's like defective. Oh, that's not good. Oh dear. Oh boy! What the hell? Oh my god! Jesus Christ! This is MADOKA. Oh my god. I don't like that. Oh, those are the dolls of the people in there? Oh, he's a judge. Third floor lords. Oh. Oh, they want to rise up floors. What's the plan? Oh my god, that guy is so sus. Holy fuck. All right, everybody, let us get into the discussion. Now, this episode was like MADOKA MAGICA episode 3 levels of like crazy. Just like everything just got real. And I think that like this show is a lot like MADOKA in the sense like I remember watching MADOKA MAGICA. I was suspicious from like day one, like of Cubey and like all that stuff. Like I was mega suspicious going into the show. And so I feel like that for me, like this is a lot like the same in that way. Like I was already suspicious of like Shadow's house, you know? But I think for like the general viewer, like this is probably the episode where shit just got absolutely real. And I'm so excited to talk about it because there's just so much like in terms of theorizing, like every single week has just been a joy with this show, like for my brain, like it's been great. So we have this first scene with MADOKA and there is a focus on the doll. And so I feel like that's foreshadowing to obviously like the doll moves and jumps around later in the episode. But I have my first class today. We'll teach each other stuff we don't know. And so I feel like this is coming back into like the end stuff that we saw this episode of Kate being like, I can't leave my room, but the dolls can talk to each other, so could you exchange information, right? Like I feel like that obviously the older dolls can't talk about the debut, but she will probably try to prioritize, MADOKA will try to prioritize talking to Lou and then like the other one that's in the OP and the end song that we don't know the name of yet that keeps showing up in some of the scenes. I'll point her out, but I do think that that's like sort of a hint towards later on is that the next episode is probably going to be focused on like learning, exchanging information, and you have to wonder, right? If dolls fail, if debuts don't go so well sometimes, if you can be discarded, how willing is the enemy going to be like to give you information, right? Like you have a character like Lou and like her Shadow Master, for example. Like what if it's the case of giving other dolls false information so they'll fuck up, right? Because I'm sure that like if all of the dolls are good, they'll all be chosen. Like I don't think that it's gonna be like, oh, we're obligated to make like 3 fail. Like I don't think that there's gonna be like a quota, like a fail quota, like you have to fail them. But you could also think like, first of all, the other dolls don't know that, and like there could be, right? You never know. And so maybe you want other people to fail so you will look more useful and more competent. That could be something that happens during the information exchange that is not good. Like say somebody gives MADOKA false information so they'll fail on purpose. Like that could be really, really bad. So what's interesting about her seeing Mia here is I feel like that like last week I talked about like this idea of 3 faces, right? In terms of the dolls. You have your work face, your Shadow Master face, like not when you're mimicking them, but when you're around them. And then you have like who you are like actually, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that Mia is being fake, but that's just like how we go through life. You know what I mean? Like the face that you have with your friends is not always an appropriate face for work. The face that I have in my YouTube videos is not always how I'm gonna be like with my friends, right? And so it's one of those things where you have a work face, a friend face, a relationship face, a parent face. Like that is like, or a family face, I guess I should say. Like that's like a big like psychological theory. And so I think that that's gonna really come into play. And I think with Mia, we can tell like when she's alone, when she's just walking through the hallway, she has a very like not angry, but like she's not like going down the hallway like this. So like neither is MADOKA necessarily, but like there's something almost like sad or a little like not irritated in the sense of angry, but like resting bitch face. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like she's not smiling, right? Obviously, she's not going down the hallway smiling. Her eyebrows are a bit narrowed in, and so I think that she was already like walking like that before she saw her. And so I would say that like happy, positive Mia is almost the face that she puts on when she's around the other dolls, but like Mia by herself is a very like, I don't know, like a very unhappy person, I would say, right? A resting bitch face person, and not necessarily that she's mean to other people, but she's not very happy like with her circumstance. That's just like a face that she puts on. I think that that's basically what I'm getting at, right? And so then she just like, you know, Emily Co, good morning. It's almost like she puts on an act right there and then, when down the hallway she wasn't being all like, good morning, right? Like, and her eyebrows change, so you guys can sort of see, like, I don't think that she's faking it in the sense that it's all fake, but I do think that maybe she feels like, oh, like we're always being watched. I can't say anything bad about Shadow's house or I'll be discarded. Like, she's always like on the I don't know how to say it, on the alert. She's always on alert to that fact. And so she has to put on a good face for Emily Co. She has to be positive. She has to brainwash her a little bit. Whereas down the hallway alone, she's like with her own thoughts, and it's just like, right? Like, that's the sort of expression that I sort of got. Or not even that, but she was like, and she had like a little sad face, in my opinion. Like, that's a little sad face, not just like a straight line, you know? Like, that's a full-ass frown, you know what I'm saying? See, and you see how nice and happy she's being, right? And so she's just confused. I thought you didn't like me. You mean the last time we met, those were Sarah's emotions, right? And so this was resolved relatively quickly. Like, for some reason, I thought that this was gonna be a bit more of a big deal than it actually was. But she was like, oh no, that was Sarah, like, whatever, right? Like, she just like, water under the bridge. That wasn't even me. But like, you know what I mean? I think that that's a nice part of the show, though, in a weird way, is that everyone accepts the very like dark and macabre and like freaky stuff is just normal, and I think that that's like a horrific part of the show, and we see that later in the episode. Like, I read like the Reddits a lot, like I read like people's discussions of the episode, and like somebody pointed out like everyone was just standing there as Rosemary was getting like you know, shadowified, whatever you want to call it, and I was like, yeah, I guess like you could say like, oh, like that's, you know, the character's being dumb, but like, doesn't it work though? Because everyone's just standing so like nonchalantly because they don't have real world experience, so they don't have knowledge, like they're told not to think, you know, like it's like, oh, don't think, obey, like just listen, just obey like somebody else so you don't do any critical thinking of your own. Like, that's how the dolls are taught, so it kind of makes sense like why Emily Co and Lou, like, they're, you know, standing there and they're kind of being, like, very relaxed about it because they don't know the danger. Like, they don't sense the danger. And they kind of do in the sense of, like, oh, like, yeah, one of them's gonna die. But, like, Lou says it very matter-of-factly, like, oh, well, one of them's gonna die. Who would you rather save, right? And so that's a very interesting thing to get into, is that it's not necessarily like, oh, they're being dumb for the sake of the plot. Like, I feel like that's the whole point of a lot of these things, is that you see these things and you're like, what the fuck? Like, as an audience member, you're like, excuse me? Like, what? Like, why do you guys think this is normal? Right? This is not normal. But then, like, even the veiled dolls, right? Nobody's questioning, nobody's like, like, that's kind of weird, that's a little spoopy. Like, no, nobody's saying that, you know, like, everyone's just treating it as perfectly normal. Oh yeah, those are just the veiled dolls, whatever. Like, nobody's like, isn't that a little weird? Right? And so I feel like I feel like that's an asset more than anything, because you're just sitting here as a viewer like, excuse me? Like, what? Right? And then you have Rosemary, and then it's our little secret, isn't it, right? Because if they knew that she was out and about with Kate, obviously, like, that's not allowed. Kate's not supposed to be in the room. But I'm sort of thinking that the adults probably know, because you still have that magic mirror thing on the door. Like, the adults probably just let it go. You know what I'm saying? Or they were like, we'll punish her later during the debut. We'll take points off for that, right? Like, I'm sure that they saw her, like, if anybody was around monitoring those things, because that door had a giant orb on it. I'm sure that it's like always watching, you know, like I'm sure that it's sort of like a tracking, almost like, oh, when she leaves the room we'll get a little notification, magical notification, right? And so so you see the difference between Rosemary. Like, I know that she's talking, and so that's a little bit different, but like Rosemary's coming down the hallway and she's like very cheerful, right? Like, she doesn't seem like she was walking down the stairs like all sad like she was. So that's an interesting aspect as well. So Lou can just be yawning because Emily Co like does yawn in another episode, but I'm a little worried just because, again, we have the OP, we have some sexual stuff going on like with the shadow, right? And then you have sort of a little tear, and that can be like, oh, when you yawn you tear up. Like, that happens to me all the time, perfectly normal. But I sort of wonder if she's going down the hallway and she's like crying or something, and I'm a little worried, you know what I mean? And she's tired all the time. Why is she tired? Because she's up all night with her shadow. Like, I'm so concerned about her, and it seems like her hair is messed up in some of the scenes, and so I'm just worried about her, sis. I'm just saying that yes, this could be a yawn, but like, she seems tired all the time, and so I'm a little bit like, right? Like, she seems tired constantly, and so that's like the thing. So this hall's gonna be important because this is where they come back to when they have to fight the monster. This is the gathering space for living dolls, one might say, right? And so what I found interesting about this is like, oh, I put my broom away here, and she remembers, like, in this room where everything looks the same, exactly where hers is, and maybe they have like numbers or something, but I just thought that that was like, really? Okay. Like, I don't know if that's like she just, I don't know, like, some people are good with like memory like that. Like, it's sort of like, oh yes, I remember I was like this many rows away from this. Like, they just sort of remember like where their body moved, and so that's like how you find it versus like numbers and stuff. She looks so like, yeah, it's this one, right? But I'm like, how did you know that, sis? They all look the same. They all look the same. And maybe that's the point, that Emily Co like treasures them so much that she like remembers exactly where it is, whereas they may take like any random one when it's their turn to clean. Like, they don't pay attention to stuff like that, and so they say that's right, as if like next time you can come get it yourself, as if she'll like know, like as if everyone knows exactly where they put their stuff. Anyway, I don't know, I was just thinking, like, is this an Emily Co thing, or is this like a doll memory? I don't know, like, I thought that that was a little weird. So then we have these. Are these for cleaning too? We use them in emergencies, but that doesn't happen too often, right? And so I'm not sure what this is exactly. Like, it kind of just looks like a hammer or something, but like, obviously, like, when I saw this, I was like, weapons, that's not good. So I think that these are the hammers that they're using later. It also looks like you could like do like the stalactite dust cleaning with something like that. Like, you could put the stalactites in the holes, right? But I think that it is just a hammer. I don't know why it's a hammer with holes in it. Like, if it's going like this way, I don't know why the sides have holes or whatever. Like, I don't know, maybe it helps with something, physics. Anyway, but this, like, clearly you can see that this is a weapon, right? So I was like, what? And so yeah, that's definitely a weapon, and we'll talk about those when we see them more later. And so these stairs go to the kitchen and the laundry, and so they're also sort of like, I guess they did this with Lou already, and now they're like, hey Lou, do you know what's in there? Do you remember from the last day of class, right? Like, something like that. The veiled dolls, there's no need for us to go there. And so here's my theory about the whole veiled doll situation. I feel like that it's probably a mixture of multiple things. Like, I'm also like thinking about the fact that we saw like first aid dolls this episode, and like the first aid team, like, they're not the veiled dolls, and so obviously I'm sort of wondering about like, okay, there are probably like shadows that are servants in a sense, but not necessarily like, I don't know how to explain it, like, not like the lowest of the servants, right? Like, you probably have, like, the actual servants, like the veiled dolls, kitchen, laundry, all of those chores, right? But then you probably have, because in this episode we get introduced to, like, a hierarchy. Like, we get introduced to the concept of floors. I could get upgraded to this floor. So here's what I'm assuming. There's, like literal, like, peasants, right? That's the veiled dolls. There's commoners in the sense of, like, more of a trade situation. So you got the blacksmith, you got the gardener, you got the first aid team, right? Stuff like that. You got, like, the doctor, right? You have those dolls and their shadows. Above that, you have nobles. Then you have third floor. Then you have the highest floor, which I think we saw, like, probably with that person at the end of this episode in the post-credit was probably, like, the highest, right? So I'm thinking that there's a bit more going on than it's just like, this is a family of nobles. I think that to some extent, even though it does seem like there is a town that they may rule over, and we'll get to that, I also think that it's possible that, like, they have, I guess, a hierarchy of servants as well. Because, like, think about, like, I don't know, like, think about, like, those, like, old, like, fairy tales that have, like, castles and stuff, right? Like, you don't just have, like, servants. You have, like, you know, a head of household. You have, like, you know, the master domo or whatever it's called. Like, you have, like, those positions. And so I feel like that there's probably, like, servants, but then there's, like, special trade dolls in the sense of, like, the doctors and stuff. Because, like, that was pretty common for noble people, I think, to have their own doctor, or at least, like, you know, have a doctor that they would call upon, right? That was just a rich person doctor. So I feel like that within Shadow's house, you don't just have nobles. I feel like that with the dolls, you could also have those other positions, like gardener, like medical team, like this, like that, right? Dressmaker, let's pretend, and you could want to, like, rise up in that hierarchy, basically. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe Kate will be, like, a librarian before she's, like, a noble or something. Or maybe she'll be right up, like, you know, going to, like, second floor as opposed to first floor. Like, I'm assuming, like, first floor would be, like, the medical team, second floor, because that guy at the end said he could even get upgraded to first floor, so I guess he's on second floor, right? I think that's what he said. And so, yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking, is that there's more positions, but the lowest of the low are, like, the veiled dolls. Now, with the veiled dolls, there are situations where the dolls are discarded, right? And so I'm thinking that the dolls could be discarded and, like, turned into veiled dolls, basically. You know what I mean? So say, like, let's just pretend it's Kate, right? Like, say Kate doesn't do so well at the debut. The shadow, I guess, is, like, killed, and then the shadow dust goes back wherever for Lord Grandfather to try again and, like, make another, like, shadow being, like, let's just say. And then the doll, like, what do you do with the doll? I don't think that you would kill the doll. That's not very nice. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that instead you would probably do the same memory wipe situation they did in the very first episode with that drink. You'd get them to drink and they would just become a veiled doll. And, like, that's the scary part, is that they don't even get, like, a right to identity or anything. Like, they're just veiled all the time because they don't get the right to have a face. And so with the medical team, they still have a right to have a face. And so, you know what this is reminding me of? This is gonna be, like, the most random, weirdest comparison, okay? But if you guys ever watched the Tinkerbell movies, okay, you have some water fairies, you have flying fairies, you got animal fairies, you got flower fairies, you got tinker fairies, right? And then you have, like, the pixie dust fairies. I don't remember what they're called. They're the people that, like, do the pixie dust. It's Terrence. It's, like, Tinkerbell's kind of love interest. He does, like, the pixie dust. You have that whole thing, right? And so I feel like that within Shadow's house, it's kind of like that, where it's like, okay, after your debut, we decide you seem like you'd be good on the medical team. Let's pretend, right? And then there's, like, chances to advance later on. But, like, it's almost like that, like, first, like, ceremony in Tinkerbell, when Tinkerbell comes in and, like, she's going around to all the talents to see what she's good at. Like, maybe, like, I don't know, Lou's talent would be X, whereas, like, another character's talent would be Y, and so that's where they would get sorted for now and stuff. And so, yeah, that's just a very, like, basic explanation of what I'm thinking. But I'm thinking that the veiled dolls may be the dolls that did not succeed. Their masters, you know, destroyed or whatever, and so they were like, well, we can't, like, reuse your face, right? We can't reuse you for whatever reason, so let's, like, brainwash you and then put you as a veiled doll. I don't know. I'm sort of thinking of it as two ways. If the shadow fails, the doll becomes a veiled doll because the doll still has some use. If the doll fails, that's probably another story, right? You know, so I'm thinking the veiled dolls are the ones that still had usefulness to some degree, but they're shadows for whatever reason, like they weren't compatible. Because there's another theory that I have because of this episode. I don't remember why exactly, but this idea of like the shadows are formed after the doll that they are assigned with and not the other way around. Like Emily Co was not made after Kate. Kate changed herself to be Emily Co. And so I wonder if there would be a little more leniency for shadows just based off of that. Like, hey, like give me a second chance. Just give me a new face. Maybe my old face wasn't good enough. So then Rosemary says like, hey, you don't need to think about that place. Pay that place no attention, right? Don't think about it, because if you think too hard, you may be like, veiled dolls, that doesn't sound like very like human rightsy. Like that doesn't sound, you know what I mean? That doesn't sound legal, I guess, like, or moral, I should say. This is Shadow's house. That's right. This house has different floors. And so here's where we get into the floors thing, right? The living doll's rooms are below the Shadows family living quarters. And so I think that basically what this is getting at is that later on they talk about the fact that nobles are in like a different wing of the house. And so I think that the wings are probably also going to be important. So I think that that guy wants to be on the third floor of the noble's wing, whereas the other wing could be like the servants' wing, right? Like the medical team and stuff. We'll get back to that. This is the debut costume, and so they actually did talk about the tights because I talked about that. I was like, like it seems like they want her to cover her skin, right? And so they explained that. That is a portrait. You wear it serving as a face, right? And so we saw that last episode because I did point that out. If you guys remember, I did point out the fact like, it seems like they're trying to like hide this part and be like, hey, don't look over here. Like these are like the same legs as the Shadow's legs. Like look at the face, like that sort of thing. And so I thought that was like really cool. The arms and legs are covered in lace so your face will stand out. It's a living doll's formal attire, right? So this is as formal as they're getting, you know, compared to like the nobles and the costumes that they have. And so I thought that that was really good. You will wear it after the debut. So they point out that Lou has not done the debut either. And so I feel like that with this episode being like, hey, let's exchange information, woohoo, right? Like that whole thing. I feel like that maybe like Lou will be the first person she goes to, but I doubt that Lou will have anything that helpful because it doesn't seem like it seems like Lou retains information very well, but I don't know how like smart she is in the sense of like figuring stuff out to help them in the debut more, right? But I don't know. This is the Great Hall, which we cleaned last time, right? And we have an interesting scene where Emily Co, like, she sees the dust and she's just like, right? Like she just notices it. And I think that like Rosemary says something like, oh, like, you know, after my own heart, right? Like she's like, oh my, your sharp eye is impressive. And so what I think may happen is that I know that Rosemary and the other girl, they're post-debut and they are the oldest, so they are the leaders here. But I wonder if like this could be a position like Star Bearer, right? Like Star Bearer is a position, right? And so I wonder if there's like medical team, star bearer, leaders. And so I wonder if Rose and Rosemary and Mia, did I say something else before? I don't remember. Rosemary and Mia were sorted into being leaders with possibility in the future for them to be nobles. And so I feel like your sharp eye is impressive will come back later in the sense that like Emily Co, it could be decided like, hey, you have a sharp eye to be like a leader. So that's what you're going to be. Like that's what your job is going to be after the debut. Or like, you know, like you have a sharp eye, so we'll make you a star bearer. Like I feel like that this is gonna come back for this like specific like circumstance of like, oh, like Emily Co, like these are her talents, right? As opposed to maybe another character's talents. And so maybe she'll get sorted into being a leader. That's just my thoughts for right now. So then we see the debut hall and it's basically like this like gate. I think that I didn't get a screenshot of it, but she says, what do we do during the debut? It's a very important ceremony. The competency of both Shadow and Doll will be judged. So that's the thing. If a doll is competent, but not the Shadow, I feel like the doll could have the chance to be a veiled doll or maybe something else. If it's the doll that's not competent, I wonder if the Shadow could get a second chance, because I did have a theory that Kate has had a doll before, right? And that Emily Co is actually her second chance. That was a theory that I had earlier, and maybe Kate remembers, maybe she doesn't. I don't know. But then you would wonder, okay, not that she had Emilyco before, but she had another doll before. Well, what happened to that doll? I feel like the options are like veiled dolls or like worse, I guess, because if it was the shadow that was competent but not the doll, you would sort of have to wonder like what would happen to the doll. Maybe the doll would get a second chance with a different shadow, like maybe they would just need to be like alternatively paired, if that makes sense. But I have a feeling that like the best that could happen to a doll that's judged as incompetent is that they would become a veiled doll. Like the worst, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they'd kill them. Like, that seems like a waste of, like, resources, you know? But anyway. And whether they will be assets to the Shadows family. So again, like that whole asset thing, it's like, what are your talents? Like, what role can we put you in? Can you do medical, right? Or like, again, like the veiled dolls are in the kitchen. And so I wonder if they just cook food for them, or if like you have like a different like a chef role, right? Like I don't know, but yeah, maybe that's why the bread is so bad, because the veiled dolls were all like, you know, incompetent, but Kate has good bread, so maybe there's like actual chefs that have like face. I don't know, but anyway. Once a Shadows family member debuts, they are said to have a face, right? So yeah, that's the whole thing, and that is a sign of adulthood. And so, yay, puberty metaphor, woohoo! That's something that I talked about in my last other two discussions. Oh, so then Mistress Kate is not an adult, right? And so it's funny how they never really talk about like their like masters and stuff. Like obviously Mia talks about Sarah, but like Rosemary and like Lou, they don't talk about theirs, right? You might say she's in her trial period, and I'm like, that's so sad, right? She's just like, it's her trial run. What happens if you fail the trial? Right? And so that's probably not good. And so you see Emilyco like gets very sad, right? Do debuts ever not go so well? Because she's thinking about what Sarah said, and I think that Mia is probably realizing that and like, hey, Emilyco, don't say too much, or they'll figure out how you got that idea in your head. So yeah, they're not allowed to discuss the details, and I feel like it's gonna be something really fucked up. Like, just because they're not allowed to talk about, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, you have to judge their competency without them having like outside information, if that makes sense, you know? But like, it's like an exam almost. Like, you can't know the questions before you take the test, sort of thing. But I am a little worried. I'm a little worried it's gonna be something really fucked up. It's gonna be like, okay, kill the shadow monster. Or something like Dolan and Shadow, kill the shadow monster. And maybe like Kate will have an advantage because she can seem to control things now. I don't know, I'm just saying. And then Lou, like, I don't know, like, I feel like that Lou is just so vacant sometimes. And so I think she looks at Lou for some sort of comfort, and Lou's like, I don't know any more than you do, bitch, right? And so that's the thing, is like, Emilyco's gonna have to branch out for information, because I don't think that she's gonna be very helpful. I don't know. Are there any dolls older than you, Rosemary? Why, of course there are. They're in another wing of the house. And so again, like, this is the trial period ring, I guess. Like, this is the trial run wing, right? But then in the other wing, you probably have, like, this is the nobles hierarchy. This is, like, the, you know, the, like, again, like, the commoner, but still, like, useful commoner. Like, you know, the stable people and the blacksmiths and all that stuff, like, that's, you know, the medical team, that's, like, their wing of the house. Like, I feel like that the wings of the house are almost divided like a class system. You know, it sort of reminds me of that movie where there's the train, and, like, the train is divided. You have first class, second class, third, and then the tail and all that stuff. And so, like, I feel like that the tail are the veiled dolls. Third class, that's like maybe the medical team and some other stuff. Like, if there are like chefs for the nobles separate from the dolls' laundry kitchen situation, right? Then you have, like, the second class, so that's a bit more fancy, and then first class is obviously, like, the king is up there, right? And so, yeah, that's sort of how I'm thinking of it. I think in second class in that movie, there's, like, teachers and police officers and stuff in second class, whereas third class is more, like, actual, like, manual labor, so maybe that's how it works here, too, but I think it's, like, a class system and stuff. It's where the lords live, and so she seems to say that in a very, like, oh, I want to be there sort of way, and so I feel like that not everyone gets to be a lord and lady or a noble, right? Like, you have to, like, you know, get up there. And so she looks at it like idealizing it, because maybe dolls have a better life there. I could sort of see something like that, especially because you have dolls at the end of the episode. They're running the debut, right? So maybe they get more freedom, and so that's where she hopes to be. But right now she's just been sorted as a leader until they, you know, I don't know, until they upgrade her. Like, I'm interested to see if you have had your debut already, like, what are they waiting for? Like, are you waiting for results, sis? Or have you already been sorted and then, like, ascending to lord or ladyship happens later? Again, telling Emilyko not to think. And this is where, like, again, the animation just seemed kind of weird in some places. Like, I don't know, like, there's something about this episode that it didn't seem as high quality as the other two to me, but maybe that's just because, like, they're walking down the hallways and everything's sort of weird. But see, so we don't see Mia's eyes, and so again, not seeing characters' eyes in anime, that usually means that they're lying, but in this case, I don't think that it's a lie, as opposed to it's more like, I don't want to say malicious intent, but I feel like that she's saying this as like a word of caution, like a word of warning, like, living dolls must feel nothing but loyalty to the Shadows family, you must remember that. Like, this face is a bit more like just like, hey, little piece of advice sort of face. But the fact that her eyes are covered, I feel like that she knows that she has to feel that way, but she doesn't. Like, I think that it's obvious that she has some distaste for Sarah, especially like considering the post-credit from the other episode. And it's also just like, I feel like that this is more of the real Sarah right here. The teeth clenched, like, I don't know how to do it, but like that thing that she was like, that anime angry that she had last episode, like, this is more that, Mia, sorry, did I say Sarah? That is more like the real Mia. This is how Mia actually feels, and so, you know, you must remember that, but that doesn't mean she believes it. You know, like, I feel like that this is her not believing it. She knows she must feel that in order for survival, but she doesn't really. How go your sentiments towards the Shadows family, so they go towards each Shadow Master. So it's saying, like, your sentiments towards the family are also, like, representative of, like, the Master and, like, vice versa, right? How you feel about Kate should be, you know, how you feel about the Shadows family, but how you feel about the Shadows family is also how you have to feel about, like, Kate, if that makes sense, right? I feel like what Mia is trying to say here is that the Shadows family decides if you are useful, the family as a whole. So even if other members of the family are like cool or okay or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because ultimately, like, you have to serve your Shadow Master. And so, like, if you hate your master, like, if Mia hates Sarah, right, like, that is going to be a problem for the Shadows family as a whole. Like, I feel like that's what she's trying to impart, is like the Shadows family is what keeps you alive, and like the representative that you are with, the shadow that you are with, they are ultimately the ones that decide that. And so you have to, like, kiss ass, right, to your shadow, because if you kiss ass to your shadow, you're kissing ass to the family. So I feel like that's basically what she's saying, right? Abide by this and we shall be happy. And so she's like, hey, like, suck up to your shadow, like, and then, like, you know, suck up to the family, basically, right? And so Lou actually has a more sad look. Like, she's been pretty vacant, right, this entire time, but I do feel like that she has a sadder look than usual, and so let's check back on that later. But I wonder if what Mia is saying is affecting her, because she either, like, really dislikes her Shadow Master, or maybe it's the reverse, where she, like, likes her Shadow Master, but, like, doesn't feel too hot about, like, the rest of the family. Or I feel like that, though, she doesn't seem to think a lot. Like, I don't know, she seems very, like, vacant in that way, and so, I don't know, like, she seems like she's, like, head empty a lot of the time, and, like, that's how they want you to be, but I think she's a little too head empty, and so I'm a little worried about her. But yeah, I wonder if she's like, oh, that concerns her, because she is not happy, like, with her Shadows Master, but that means that she would be discarded by the family as a whole. Living dolls that are not loyal and useful will be discarded, and so you have a very panicked face, right, from Mia right there. Almost like her pupils are so large, like almost like she's being brainwashed to, like, repeat it. But I feel like that basically what she's getting at is, hey, like, I need my master to think that I'm useful so I can stick around even if I hate her. I feel like that's what we're getting at. She looks so serious, whereas Rose is just like, right? Like, she's like she's just, like, slammed on the on the windowsill and stuff, discarded. And so this is where things get like really spooky and cultish. So she repeats Lord Grandfather because she heard Sarah say it, but I'm sure that like, you know, Rosemary isn't like, oh, did she talk to, you know, another shadow? She probably thinks that Emily Coe heard Kate say it, right? And so she just like covers up her mouth, right? And she has this panicked expression, almost like the walls have ears. I entirely think that the walls have ears, by the way, 10,000%. Only members of the Shadows family call him that. And so you see how like panicked she looks, right? Like you see how concerned she looks, like, hey, do not, like, you know what I mean? Like that is like blasphemy. We call him Lord of Shadows House and the Shadows family, father of all living dolls. And so I feel like that this is like propaganda, because I do think that like all of the dolls are human and they were just stolen away like at a nearby village. And I actually have like a theory about that, and we'll get to that point. But the grand creator, like he may create the shadows, maybe, I don't know, but like they treat him like he's God. And so that's probably not good. But those words must seldom pass your lips. And so again, I feel like this is all like propaganda-ish. Like, but why let this man lead all this? Why let Lord Grandfather, you know, do all this? I don't know. We kind of have to see like the system outside of this place. Such an eminent name will be tainted if those of our standing speak it, right? So again, it's like reinforcing that like classism in here. And then we hear the bell ring and she's like, oh my God, are they after me? But no, it's a bell for a completely different reason. So what I find interesting about this is if they had actually decided to wear the helmets, maybe the soot monster wouldn't have been able to get to them as easily, right? Because like Mia's saying it as in like, you know, like forget about that, like we just gotta go. But Rosemary is saying like, hey, you know, it obscures your vision a little bit, like we need to use our tools properly, like she's still in teaching mode. And Mia's just like, like really, do we have time for this, right? Like she's acting so calm. I don't know like why she gave this face, but I think it was because of that, like really, Rosemary, this isn't the fucking time. Like that's how I felt like that expression was for, right? But if they had worn the helmet, things may have gone a little better. Like things may have gone a little better, you know? So I wonder if that like shows to like Emily Coe's like quick thinking and her like intelligence, right? Like, you know, she is very intelligent in this episode. And so I wonder if it speaks to that. And that's very interesting to me as an idea. So I think that the Mia that we're seeing right here, like this is the real Mia. She's like, is that even a real thing? Like she's just like so like heated almost. And so she says a cluster of scorches. What's a scorch? A scorch is soot that gathers together and begins to move with ill intent. And so here's the thing about this. In the first episode, we see Kate stomp on something, so Kate seems to know this anyway, right? But I sort of wonder if these are all bad, right? Because we do have that scene at the beginning where you have that lady with the bird, but that didn't necessarily look like a scorch. That looked like soot that was just being moved in the way that like Kate is able to move it later on. Like it didn't look like a scorch in the sense of what we see this episode. I don't think that it had eyes. So I don't think that the bird was a scorch. I think that that was just like an adult using their power to basically like, it's like if Kate made a soot man and then decided to like move the soot men around. That is how I see the bird at the beginning of the very first episode. In terms of the scorch though, I feel like that it could overlap in the sense that if you can control the soot, I would say that maybe like the scorch could be controlled by a shadow as well. Like maybe it's controlled by another member of Shadow's house, right? Because if it's like all their negative emotions, I don't know, like maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, right? Like maybe this one just got out, but it could also be intentional, right? Because what if you let a scorch fester on purpose versus Kate crushing it in that first episode, right? Like what if she like let it go and then she was able to control it because she can control the soot? I feel like that it would grow so sentient that you would lose control eventually, but we do see something similar in the first episode. You have all these little like, almost like, I don't know how to explain it, they look like the tip of the eraser, like those really old erasers are like tip of the thimble. Okay, you have these like thimble things that have little arms, like those to me seemed more like scorches compared to that bird. that we saw in the first episode. And so I think that like you can control a Scorch. I think 100% you can control it, whether this is one that like went loose or it's being like let loose for a specific purpose. Now at the end of this episode they do say something very sketchy, and that is like culling the failed fruit. And so that's not in reference to the debut. Like I think that he is saying like, oh, how's the debut preparation going? Like we need to like continue culling the fruit. Like I'll go to that, like obviously I'll go to that at the end of this episode. But that sort of gave me the idea that like the debut isn't just the day that you debut, like it's constant. So I feel like that the shadow monster was actually inserted on purpose by a noble as a test to basically like kill some dolls. Because I think that probably some dolls died. I don't know. Obviously Rosemary's okay, but like even maybe like Rosemary will like face consequences in the future, even though that they like saved her and fixed her, right? But I wonder like, if the Soot Sickness happened to a doll pre-debut, would they be discarded of, or would they be seen as useless? But I think that like the soot thing, the Scorch, was actually done on purpose in order to like basically like reduce some dolls, like how do you say it? Like not, I don't know how you say the word anymore. I think it was basically inserted to lower the numbers, to see who was strong and who was weak. Like it was almost like a little Hunger Games type thing, like a little like test before the debut. And like some dolls probably died or something, or maybe they saw the incompetency of some dolls, I don't know. But then we see like the whole monster. This is so MADOKA Magica. It's like almost like a completely, not completely different art style, but like how MADOKA has like the anime parts and then like different like art in those like in the witch what do you call them, like the witches domains and everything has like a totally different style. That's what this reminded me of. And then you see like these people, they're dead, you know what I mean? Like I think that some dolls definitely died and that this was like a culling instrument, that they did this on purpose, right? And so I think that this is the one that we keep seeing but we don't know the name of. Like she like covers her ears and like goes on the floor. And so again I wonder about like if this is a test for competency. She like basically fell down on the job right there, right? And so then we see, obviously, our fated four in the background, and they're like, what now? Let's wait for the Star Bearer's instructions, right? And so again, Star Bearer, is that a position that you can come into, right? She even has like a little star on her bow. And so I feel like that what could be happening is that after your debut, you become a leader, right? Then you could become a Star Bearer. Then after a Star Bearer, you could be a noble, because like this girl to me doesn't look so much older. Like she doesn't look like she's Emily Co's age, but she looks around Rosemary's age, like a year or two older. So I feel like that there are probably different paths for like upward trajectory. You know what I mean? And the Star Bearer is like an advanced version of one of the leaders, like one of the older dolls. So in terms of why that doll glared at Emily Co, I don't think it was just because of the whole like, oh, the outside of the room thing, because like she was talking to the shadow, I guess, and like I guess that the doll isn't supposed to talk to the shadow, right? Because she was like yelling at both of them. But I do just think it's because she's like angry, like she like hates people. Like I think that it's just because like she's just like, fuck you and your positivity. Like I feel like that the glare wasn't like, oh, you're not supposed to be talking to me. It was like, shut the fuck up, bitch. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't appreciate that necessarily. That's how I feel about it. And so, yeah, you can see, like, her teeth are pointy, her eyes, too. Like, I sort of wonder, though, if my other theory about, like, this doll being fixed or something, it could be the case, just because we do have, like, the girl, like, her shadow at the beginning doing some sort of, like, not ritual, but she was, like, emitting a lot of soot for some reason, and, like, there were, like 5 different directions, and so what if that's, like, in order to, like, upgrade or something? What if, like, the shadow, like, she wasn't actually, like, necessarily, like, emanating soot in the sense of like some sort of ritual to fix her doll, but what if it's more the case of like she was turning in to like a teenager, right? Because you have Emily Co is like a child, and then I feel like that Mia and Rosemary are more like preteen, so like 13, 14, right? And so what if like this doll was like turning into the 15, and to do that you have to do some sort of soot ceremony like as a shadow so you can grow older? Because I'm assuming like, you know, is Kate gonna grow taller? Like I'm assuming she needs more soot for that, right? And so that could have been like a Lord Grandfather thing as well. Like, you know, the coming of age, like part of the coming of age is like receiving more soot so you can like advance. And it's like, again, the puberty metaphor, it's like getting your period, right? She seemed like she was screaming in pain, and so that's what I thought of. But yeah, this problem won't fix itself. Barbie, we brought the hammers, and so that's a nice funny thing. Like I don't know how popular like Barbie dolls are in Japan, like, but you know, obviously like Barbie dolls, I don't know if that's why they did it, but it's kind of funny. So yeah, so this is the hammer, so I'm pretty sure this is the hammer from before because it has a similar design and stuff. We brought the hammers, what now? Smash it to bits, obviously. And so yeah, they just go for it. See, so this was the hammer with the holes that we saw earlier, so it was. But yeah, and so we just see them get squished and squooshed, and I do wonder though, because there is this scene, and I guess I'll find it eventually. Okay, so first of all, we see the splatter, and then it reforms into like a little one, right? And they sort of like scatter, right? Like it breaks off from the little one, and they look sad though. Like they look almost, I don't want to say innocent, but they like, I don't know, like obviously. When they form later, they're dangerous, but there is this scene with the girl that's, again, the shadow that we don't know the name of, but anyway, we'll get to that when we get there. Rose, you dimwit, is her whole team made up of dimwits too? Right, so I guess they were supposed to, like, you know, stop them from going down the stairs and stuff, and them being alone is, like, a big problem, and so I think that this was interesting because, like, Mia, like, drags Emilyco, and so I feel like that this is part of, like, proving her usefulness, like, making sure, like, Mia's like, okay, let's go after them, right? You know, let's prove our usefulness, because, like, what if the Star Bearer reports to somebody and would report that Emilyco, Rose, Lou, and Mia were useless in this time of need, right? Like, that could be dangerous. And so you see this girl, I don't know why she's not doing anything anymore, because before she had, like, her hands on her ears, but now she's just, like, staring at them, right? And so she looks at her feet, and it doesn't look like it's attacking her. It looks like it's like, sis, help me. Like, it looks like sad, and then she sees like the look in it. And so it seems almost like sentient in a way where she doesn't want to kill it. And so I do genuinely wonder whether or not like these things are like actually bad, or maybe they're just controlled to do bad things. And like when those, when that split happened, I don't know how else to explain it, but when it got crushed, it broke off, and because it broke off, it regained some control, whereas the original giant Scorch was being controlled by a shadow. Let's pretend, right? Like, let's say it was being controlled by a shadow, so the piece broke off, and then it, like, scurried and got sad and was like, help me, I don't want to die, because it's like those little things with the little arms and the thimble, like, shaped things. Like, maybe they don't always have ill intent. Maybe that's, like, propaganda, but really it's the Shadow Master that has the ill intent. And so maybe what happened in this scene over here, right? Like, maybe it wasn't just that they, like, merged together. Maybe another shadow, like, picked up on what was happening in the house and decided to take control of it, right? And so that's sort of what I could see. Because, like, look at her face. She's like, aw. I don't know if she's scared, but it kind of, like, looked like, oh, like, you aren't, like, bad. You have a little sad face. I don't know. That Star Bearer truly is a horrible creature. So I guess this is what Mia meant when, like, not all the dolls are nice. And so, like, Emilyco's trying to remember everything, right? And so, like, it seems like Mia's irritated, and I feel like she's almost concerned because it seems like, Emilyco, why are you trying to remember all this stuff, sis? You know, are you trying to take down the system? I don't know. Like, she says save it for later. This isn't a classroom, so she seems to be irritated in, like, you know, that sort of, like, patience way. When Rosemary has that scene earlier, like, she gets irritated, you know, like, Rosemary almost did the classroom thing, and then she gets irritated. But I do wonder if it's like, Emilyco's kind of weird. She's not like Lou. You know, like, why is she trying to gather all this information? Why is she thinking so much? Right, so I feel like that could be important. So here's the big thing that I wanted to talk about, okay? Right? You see this town, and you see this mountain, and then you see a house at the top of the mountain. I think that this is, like, the Shadows family, like house. This is the layout, is that you see the train go up the mountain, right? So I feel like that this is like the house, like this is the manor, right? This is the train, and then the town below is where they like rule or have dominion over, and like maybe you have to give all your firstborns to the Shadows family. So I feel like that this painting had more of a meaning than it just being, oh, like the things hiding behind the painting, like seeing the painting, like that's Shadow's house, isn't it? And this is a town, and so I wonder if the reason why they're able to retain control is because they're like lording over this, they're like, you know, ruling over this town, right? And like they're entirely almost divided from the town, except when they come to collect your firstborn, right? And so I wonder if it's like, yes, like we give everyone in this town prosperity and like growth and like, you know, wealth, and no one will ever go hungry except you must give us your firstborn, right? Like I wonder if it's something fucked up like that. Maybe it's the soot itself that brings some type of prosperity. You know what I mean? I don't know how exactly, but obviously like coal is a resource, right? Like, could you, like, you know how they say if you, like, put pressure on, like, a rock, it'll be a diamond? If you put pressure on, like, the soot, could it become, like, coal or something? And so, like, what if that's the thing, is that this town is, like, this rich town that, like, you know, sells coal or something, and, like, oh, well, the coal comes from, like, Shadow's house, and so to live here and to be, like, not too rich, because we still want to rule over them, but to be happy peasants instead of, like, suffering peasants, to be commoners, like, middle class, like, to be middle class, right? Instead of other places in this fantasy world where people are starving or whatever, like we obey the Shadows House people because they give us like opportunity. They give us coal, right? Or whatever, like they give us resources and like we give them our firstborns. Nobody asks any questions. Poke it from that side, I'll smack it when it comes out. Again, they don't have the proper weapons for this, which is kind of weird considering Rose was like, we need to use our tools properly, but then didn't give them the tool. Like, remember how Rose was like, those are the tools we'll use during an emergency? She didn't think that this was emergency enough to give like Mia a hammer, right? Like, this is all they have, right? And so that, then we see like there's something moving on this side, right? And so again, like it does sort of have the vibe of like other creatures that we've seen, but it's also very different, right? Like you can just tell the difference, I think, between something like the bird and something like this. And so it's like interesting how like Mia, you know, sacrifices herself in a sense, like for Emilyco, she's like, look out, and like pushes her out of the way. And then we get a very like MADOKA-esque scene if you've seen episode 3 of MADOKA Magica, and she gets covered right in the Scorch. And it doesn't seem like she's choking in the sense that she can't breathe, right? It seems like when they were like, oh, like they'll hang her, like that seemed like more like snap their neck, like compared to like not being able to breathe air. So I think that like in that regard, it wasn't something like that. And so like, no, Lou, not Rose, smack the soot on her head, right? So again, I don't think it's just Lou being stupid. I think that like most of the dolls may have an inclination to just like be obedient, right? And be very literal. Like I feel like that Lou just takes things literally. She's not stupid. She's just like, she doesn't think for herself. That's how they're basically, you know, that's how they've been taught to some extent, but I feel like that it needs to be a balance because they're judging the doll's competency and its usefulness, right? Their loyalty and their usefulness. Like, I feel like that Lou is loyal, but she's not that competent sometimes, whereas Emilyco is competent most of the time anyway. And so, yeah, then we get, you know, this scene with her being like, right? And so, I don't know, like, why they were all just standing there for a little bit, because I guess they didn't want to smack the back of her head, right? But then you have the other one coming from this direction, like, it was just not great. And so you see that, like, it wasn't really a creature until two halves combined to make this thing. And so, yeah, like, even look, like, Emilyco looks surprised, Lou just looks like, a little sad, and then Mia, she's, like, sweating, but she looks, like, sad as well. They don't look as horrified as I was, or I imagine them to be. And so this is where things get dark. And so you actually see, like, with the soot stuff on her clothing, this is very reminiscent of the end song where you see everyone and it's, like, happy, like, Emilyco's cleaning the room or whatever. And then, like, everyone's gray. And like the clothes have soot on them and everything, so I think that's probably representative of like a Scorch coming in and like fucking with them and everything. And so yeah, this like turns into more of a monster when it combines, and then it like runs up the stairs, and this was like so creepy. But I guess it was up the stairs. Yeah, it runs up the stairs, and then it tries to like go in the corner of a hallway, and so she's like, oh no, she'll hang to death. And again, they seem to have a concept of death and everything. So I'm like, nah, you're human, sis. If you can hang to death, you're not a doll. You know what I mean? And so she goes under her to stop her like neck from snapping, I guess. I don't understand how all that works. I guess just the gravity would hurt you, and so instead of like her being up in the air, basically being suspended by her head, that's such like a bad image. Like she goes under her to protect her and then starts kicking her, right? And so this is also a very fucked up scene, because later, like, Mia starts to worry about her face, and that's where we get, like, a very harrowing line that nobody seems to, bat an eye at, right? Water, huh? Pouring water on Scorches makes them slow and brittle. So again, like, I feel like that Lou, she has the book smarts, right? She remembers everything, right? She remembers everything she's told, but she doesn't necessarily know how to implement her knowledge a lot of the time. So she has cleaning spray, right? And so, it won't reach. And so I'm like, you don't want to get any closer? This is all I have in my cleaning kit, right? So they don't think to get any closer. Like, she doesn't think, hey, give it to, stand on the chair with Mia and try to do it, right? It's too far. You won't make it in time, right? Enough of this, I'm gonna let go before she scars my face. And so, yeah, this was pretty savage from Mia, and I feel like that Emily Co and Lou don't necessarily realize, like, the gravity of that line. She's basically saying, yeah, I'll let Rosemary die as long as she doesn't, like, scratch up my face, because I will be disposed of. And so, when you think about it, this isn't really necessarily selfish, because Mia is basically saying, if I get scratched up, I'm dead, right? Like, that's basically what she's getting at, is like, hey, I will not, like, die too. Like, you know what I mean? I would basically die in vain trying to save Rosemary. Like, we just both go down, right? It's either gonna be her or it's gonna be her and me, but it can't be both of us. Like, that's her thought process, right? So she's like, I'm gonna let go because, she may die, but she can't, like, make a death sentence for me. And that's how she's sort of seeing it. And so I think it's more logical for her compared to, like, Callus. It's like, if Rosemary is fated for death because we have no way to get out of this situation, why do I need to die too? And so Lou says, I don't like making choices, and I'm like, I don't like that from you, Lou. But, again, I feel like that's going to be Lou's failure later, because even though there's the loyalty in terms of not making choices and being told what to do and, like, following your master's orders, there's also the competency, and I feel like that's a problem for Lou. Emily Co, which one would you save, Mia or Rosemary? And I'm like, God damn it. But I think that Emily Co's response is very indicative of her character. It reminds me a lot of, like, Promised Neverland, I guess, where, like, oh, like, we'll save these people, right? Like, they're all talking in the very first season of Neverland, and Emma's like, no, we'll save everyone. Like, she's very insistent on that fact, right? And so then Emily Co remembers, like, the water in the vases, and so this is why Emily Co is different compared to, like, the other dolls, I think, is for that, like, fast thinking and everything. And so, see, Lou even looks surprised. She's like, what? Right? And then she just, like, throws the water on top of the Scorch, and it breaks away. And so I thought that this was, like, a really compelling scene for Emily Co to show how competent she really is and how smart she really is. But I feel like it was also a good scene for Lou, because Lou is realizing, like, hey, maybe I need to think a little more. So I think that Lou may be okay, because I feel like the knowledge exchange is going to be, like, Lou giving manual smarts, like book smarts, but then Emily Co inspiring her to, like, think for herself a little bit. That's how I sort of read it. But yeah, and so, she's covered in soot, but she's kind of okay, and so she falls on all of them, so that's more of a little, like, comedic thing. What a relief, the Scorch came off. We're supposed to clean up, yet you made a mess with that water. And so Lou is saying, like, Lou thinks very basically, I can't make mess, my job is to clean, right? And so she wouldn't do something like that. That never occurred to me. You're amazing, Emily Co. So I feel like that this is the first, like, genuine, like, really heartfelt moment that we get with her, and I feel like that's gonna be really good. And I feel like that's that's gonna be the exchange. Emilyco will inspire her, and maybe all hope is not lost for her necessarily. Yeah, and so this is a scary thing too, like how it took over her pupils, and I guess like the soot is almost like controlling her. So here's what I'm wondering, okay? I think that what happened is that a shadow master, like a shadow, is controlling the Scorches, right? So I think what happened is that because some soot got inside her, that shadow master is still trying to maneuver their Scorch and doesn't realize that their Scorch, in a sense, has gone into a doll. So that's why she keeps banging against the wall, because I feel like that, like a normal Scorch could just go like under the floorboards or something, like not necessarily transparent, but like almost like a bug, like a very flat bug, like go across the floor. So I feel like that's what the Shadow Master is trying to do. He's trying to like, okay, you can usually go under the floorboards, what's happening? But she's just headbutting into the wall. So I think that she is being controlled by her shadow, and I do wonder if that is going to be dangerous later on, because you do have you know, these adult dolls at the end of the episode, and I sort of wonder, like, are you in a position where you have a lot of power, or have you merged somehow with your Shadow Master and become one or something? Like, I don't know. Like, that's just sort of what I was thinking about. Like, obviously, this is a very, like, this is a tell. Like, you can tell that it's happening, but what if it's more subtle, where eventually, like, the shadow ends up somehow like controlling their doll, like very like literally, you know? And so I wonder, like, what if that's how Emilyco and Kate like end up doing well, like at some later point, is like, what if you like sewed the soot into the clothing, and so whenever Kate makes a movement, Emilyco also makes a movement because Kate is controlling her, versus like, I think that with Mia, it probably comes naturally to her, right? Like with Mia, maybe it comes naturally, whereas with like Emilyco, maybe that's a little trick that they use in order to get by. It's also possible that later in the episode, they say that there's no mention of this in like the manual or shadow lore or whatever, and at first I took that like, oh, Kate has powers, like Kate's probably like the propaganda machine's not gonna like that, but I actually think that maybe instead it could be a case of like, that's why it's not in the manual, because you need to figure that out and it's not told to you. So that entire time when Sarah was moving in that episode, Mia was actually like partially being controlled by the clothing, like it's sewn into the clothing, right? Like the formal wear. Like what if the formal wear it actually has like soot inside, or those tights, right? You wear the tights to make your face stand out, but what if those tights have soot in them and then they control, like the shadow controls the soot. So the debut is about seeing if the shadow has figured out if they can control soot yet, right? Whereas like with the doll, like yes, they still need to follow like Kate's facial expressions, but that could be like an added piece of help that we see later on. And so I wonder if that could go even further with like a shadow controlling their doll like through a scorch or something, kind of like how we see the Soot Sickness here, right? The first aid team will handle it. And so these dolls look a little bit older. Like this looks like a 25-year-old doll, right? Like this guy, I don't know, he's kind of short, so not so much, right? But I feel like that, again, we could have a situation where it's that sort of like class system thing, is that these dolls, like they're not nobles, but they passed their debut and this is where they got sorted, basically. Because like some of them look young, but like they look kind of older. Like they look like more like 16, 17, like she looks like the youngest, right? Whereas like Mia, I feel like looks younger than these two boys, and like Mia definitely looks younger than this lady in my opinion, right? And so I feel like that's gonna be like very like an interesting thing, like just this idea of, oh well, not all the adults get to be like nobles, like who else, like what other roles are there in the house? And I think medical is one of them for sure. And so this is where Raleigh moves, and so I really wonder, like, why did Raleigh move? Like, did he move because Kate woke up and like she was doing something, or was this another shadow like in the house passing by? Also, like, if soot is scorch that collects with ill intent, I do think that the dolls being like sewn up with the soot could be a bad idea, just because like what if it like it's spending its time, like it's a little egg, it's a little time capsule, like there's soot manifesting in there and can't get out, and one day it's just gonna rip open and be very bad. So Emilyco is yawning because like obviously she's been exhausted, like, you know, like after the events of last night she's probably stressed, but then I think Lou starts to yawn again, and I'm like, sis, you never sleep well, and she seems to have hairs again out of place, and so I'm worried worried about her. I'm very worried about Lou, but yeah. I just noticed, like, she's yawned twice, like 2 days in a row now. I'm not surprised considering that scare on your first day of class. It even shocked me, right? And so she seems like a bit more like upset and like sad about that. Is Rosemary going to be all right? She'll be fine. She was still moving. As long as she's moving, she's alive. And if this is Rose we're talking about, she'll say something like, that was so embarrassing, right? And so I feel like that again, this sort of is a tell in terms of how like the dolls learn to mimic. Like she doesn't just mimic Sarah, she picks up on people's like cues well enough to mimic them as well, like that she can mimic Rosemary. And so I feel like that that'll come in later, and I feel like that it's gonna be like part intuition of how to mimic someone, right? Like part skill, but also like maybe those soot moving clothes, maybe I'm right about that. That would be kind of cool, right? Today we have something fun in store, and so I wonder like how many days this was over. I'm guessing like 3, because I can't see, like Emily Co was washing up, but this is their first real shower, and so I can't see this being more than a week, just because it's like at least once a week you should probably wash up, you know what I mean? Or you should probably shower, I should say, because she has been washing up in her little basin and stuff, right? We will wash ourselves squeaky clean in the washroom, but they're also being measured, and so I feel like that maybe this is less about being clean and more about like, you know, I hear in like some schools and like maybe mostly Japanese schools, they do like a weigh-in day and a height check and stuff, right? And like that's like a thing. You know, like usually you would go to like your doctor once a year for stuff like that, but I think they do it like in school or something. And so I feel like that's kind of what this is. It's like, it's not even like, oh yeah, they're just showering, access to the washrooms. Like, no, it's also to send statistics back to the shadow like masters, like to the nobles, and be like, hey, like this is how the dolls are doing. Like that's sort of the vibe that I personally get. Like, you know, this doll, like, grew this much, this doll not so much, right? Like, that sort of thing. And then we also see, like, hair standards, and so I'm assuming that, like, ends when you're, depending on the position you're in, just because, like, Emily Co's hair is, like, way longer than one of the pictures we see, and so is, like, the doll that's a star bearer, so I feel like that, like, to some extent, they all need to be uniform at first, but then they can, like, flourish a bit as they get older, so I don't know. Emily Co, you can go in with me. Lou, you find someone else, and so I guess that she found Rosemary, I'm assuming, right, because she comes out with Rosemary later, and then they do the soot remover, I guess. I think that that's what happened here. So Emily Co asks if this is the soap that is like for cleaning and stuff, and then they're like, no, it's a special type of soap for dolls, right? And I'm like, I feel like this is like a human soap, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like this whole doll thing. Anyway, I was scared. I thought water would get inside me and I'd break, right? She's probably thinking of like those dolls, like the plushie, right? Like plushies are never the same when they get wet. You're not a doll, you're human. Anyway, all right, don't worry, living dolls are finely crafted. No. Does finely crafted mean we're built to last? Something like that. Come to think of it, you don't know many words, do you, right? And so this is where my other theory comes in. I have so many theories. That theory that I mentioned earlier, like way earlier, and then I kind of brought it up when we saw like the hints of the town. That's right, I'm still learning my letters. I was able to read when I was born. And so here's what I think this means, okay? You have like kids being kidnapped, and I feel like that despite the memory washing, you probably would still have like the ability to do something like read. Like you would have like muscle memory almost, right? Like people have lost their memory. Like people have gotten amnesia, but still know how to read, still know how to write, still know how to ride a bike, right? Like, so I'm thinking of it more as they have memory amnesia versus they were like wiped clean. Like I feel like that, you know, first I was like, oh yeah, Emily Co can't read because she's basically a baby. Like she's a newborn baby, right? But, you know, Mia is saying she was able to read when she was born. And so I think that this is about social class. It's not about like, oh, like their memory was wiped and it's just who picks it up faster. She says, I was able to read when I was born, right? And so born is basically like the first day she woke up, but she was probably around Emily Co's age, like let's say 12. That's sort of what I'm thinking, or 13. That's probably how old Emily Co is-ish, right? And so I don't think it's being able to read when you wake up as a doll. Here's what I think happens, okay? I think that you have this town and you probably have like working class, middle class, maybe a little bit more upper class, like slightly upper class, but again, not too much upper class because the shadows want to retain control. Like say a merchant, right? A merchant that is teaching his daughters to read type of thing, right? As opposed to somebody like a farmer that like can't teach their daughter to read. And so that is basically what I'm getting at with Emily Co. I think that Emily Co was from some sort of like farming family where they weren't able to teach her how to read. You know what I mean? Like that sort of like social status, and that's why she makes a chicken, because she was on a farm, right? And she like doesn't exactly remember it, but that's why she knows what chickens are. And so I think the reading when they were born has to do with like their social class before they got mind wiped or who they were taken from, right? So say like Emily Co's the firstborn daughter of like a farmer, and when she was 6 years old, she was basically like, you know, we'll take your firstborn, and brought to Shadow's house. She would have never gotten the chance to learn how to read. Whereas Mia is able to read when she was born. Could it be because Mia was from a family like a merchant or a doctor or somebody that works for like the higher class but is not themselves like a noble? You know what I mean? Like, you know, she's not like a princess or anything, right? But, you know, she's still like rich enough to learn how to read, and that's why she can read when she was born, because she was actually taught to read in the previous life that they had. I saw a couple other people with that idea as well. And so yeah, I definitely, like, I've always been on the train since the show started of like stolen humans, but this is why I think with this new information, like Emily Co was not able to read, whereas Mia was, because at first I was like, oh, they just all got brainwiped, that's why she doesn't know. But now it makes a lot of sense why there are papers in the dolls' bedrooms, because maybe a lot of dolls do know how to read, but Emily Co just sort of got unlucky in the sense that like maybe like most of the kids are like that middle class, whereas like Emily Co's like one of the only like farmer class type of situations, right? That's sort of how I see it. You know, like Belle knows how to read from Beauty and the Beast, and her father's the inventor, and we all get that like, oh, Belle, it's not right for a woman to read, but I'm assuming that this is a bit more like later, and like, you know, obviously it's a fantasy, but if we're taking like historical timeline, like it would have been acceptable for women to read, but only women in like, you know, high positions, if that makes sense. Emily Co, if her parents were farmers, would not know how to read, versus Mia, if her parents were both doctors, she would know how to read. Stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like that is where we're getting. It seems the starting line differs for each doll. And again, that's because I'm like, because you have the skills you had in your previous lifetime, sis. I was born brilliant. You were probably born rich. But anyway, but yeah, she would think that she's born brilliant because she has all these skills that like some of the other dolls don't have, because she doesn't remember her old lifetime. Mistress Sarah was quite delighted when I came to serve as her face, right? Because obviously I think Sarah demands perfection, and you, Mistress Kate's always scolding me. Well, consider yourself lucky. I will teach you all sorts of things, right? So I feel like that was at least a good scene. You know, like, don't worry, like, I know everything, that, like, big sister sort of dynamic. And so I like that, like, oh, the hooray, like, I can't wait, like, that was really cute. Then we see the shower. So again, to give us a sense of the timeline here, this looks very modern in terms of plumbing. And so I feel like we could get into, again, a little Neverland situation where, yes, they're wearing, like, that Victorian clothes and fashion, but, like, a shower and this bathhouse and this tile is all very, like, kind of modern. And so I feel like that if anything, it'll be one of those, like, you know, like Princess Diaries, how like it's a kingdom, right? And she's a princess, but it's also like modern, like it's like the 2000s or whatever. Like, I feel like that's sort of what Shadow's house is probably like, that it's probably like, I don't know, when were showers invented? Like 50s modern or something? 20s modern? I don't know when showers were invented, but anyway, it's like the world is in a certain time period, but they still just dress that way, kind of like Neverland, I'm assuming, right? And so we have this scene, and obviously, like, I've been trying to hide this from you guys, so I'll just explain it, but we have this scene of, like, oh, you know, Emily Co, like, splashes her with her hair, right, because they're, like, in the shower, and she didn't expect the shower to come on, so, like, she was getting little revenge, and she has, like, 2 marks on her back. Actually, she has 3 marks on her back, and so it's almost like they're, like, lashes. Oh my god, she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 marks on her back. And so I'm a little worried about that, like, for her, especially, like, I know that, like, it's probably just lashes and not something sexual, but there are some that go, like, very much down her torso, and considering the stuff we saw with Lou, I am still a little worried, but it's definite that she's being abused in some way. In what way, I don't know yet, but I think that that is from Sarah. Now, the question is, like, what is Sarah using to do this, right? They almost look like burn marks, right? And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the shadows have access to that would cause this. Like, I doubt she has she has access to a whip or something. So I'm a little, I'm worried. This is definitely a sign for panic, and Emily Co seems to notice it. It's also possible that this could be from her old life, right? If the old life theory is correct or something. But yeah, I don't know. This was just really this was really bad. Like, in terms of it points signs to something abusive happening is what I'm trying to get at. So we see the veiled dolls, and they are entirely in black, right? They're not supposed to be seen. They don't have faces, right? And so I do wonder if they're, like, from discarded shadows, especially because you have that whole thing of, oh, you know, we cover your arms and your legs better so your face will stand out. Well, nothing is supposed to stand out about them, right? Like, they're not even like shadows that have bright, colorful clothes. They're just, like, empty. And so see the hair thing? Like, this is how long the hair should be, and they're washing the hair. I wonder why that doesn't necessarily apply to, like, obviously Emily Co's hair is really long. Yeah, and so then you have the height thing, and so this is basically, like, that whole, like, school thing, I feel. But yeah, I'm surprised they didn't let her hair get that long, because, like, they were measuring, right? And so I wonder if that's just, like, here's how the dolls are growing. But at the same time, like, can a human really survive on just bread? Like, that's what I'm wondering, is, like, you have this whole thing of Kate seems to just eat bread, and so do the dolls. Maybe the bread is, like, packed with protein or something. Like, maybe there's something inside it that's keeping them alive, but I'm like, if they're human, they're just eating bread. Is that okay? Even better things await you as your Shadow Master's standing rises. And so, see, she was excited, oh, that's where the nobles live, because she wants to be a noble, because she knows that better things await. So this seems to be a perk that maybe the veiled dolls don't necessarily have, maybe, I don't know, but there's more perks as you, like, get up in the hierarchy, so you want your standing to rise. So there's Lou, and then Rosemary was behind her, so I think she did find Rosemary. Are you all better now? Yes, but I had quite a fright. I had heard of the Soot Sickness, but to think I would contract it, right? What is the Soot Sickness? It occurs when scorches enter the body. So again, that was a scorch. So if a scorch entered the body and the scorch was being controlled by a person, would it not stand to reason that Rosemary was being controlled by another shadow? If left untreated, the afflicted doll will break. I don't think that that's true, but I think that a human could die. Anyway, but with swift treatment, one need not worry. We have an excellent first aid team. So again, the first aid team, where is their standing in all this, right? And so I think that that's interesting. You must drink plenty of water. Indeed, you must flush out all the soot. It's so much water you will never want to drink again. And so that kind of sounds, again, more human-esque. You know, I don't know, like, in other medical situations where that happens, but I have heard about something like that before, like the water flushing. And Lou actually seems a bit more happy in this scene, like she's relieved that Rosemary's okay. And she already has her bow in her hair, whereas the other ones don't. But anyway, so you're all better now. I'm so glad. This just won't do. I wish to show what a fine team leader I could be. That was so embarrassing. And so I wonder, again, like, if being a good team leader factors into advancing their standing, and Rosemary may have failed, whereas Mia may have succeeded, right? And so I find that sort of interesting. But I do like this scene, like, for the little comedic bit, like, oh yeah, she did exactly what you said. And so it seems like that this was almost like a flashback. Like, we as the audience saw this because Emily Co was retelling this story to Kate, and so I thought that that was like a little nice addition, right? The first aid team is the best, and so she's basically parroting what she heard from Rosemary. I'm so glad the four of us will be able to clean together again. And so she says, oh, that's wonderful, and she does look almost a little bit thoughtful. Kate has never heard of a phantom, right? And so again, that's one of those things like, What's going on with that? Oh, forgive me, I didn't mean to keep talking like that. No, it's quite all right. As you've been told before, so this is about like the doll and everything, like, oh, just put things back where they belong, right? And so yeah, that wasn't connected to the other thing, but Kate's like getting suspicious. I've never heard of a phantom. Maybe we should look into this, that sort of thing. So yeah, this is talking about how the dolls have been moving. You may correct your failings, but excuses will not be tolerated. So she's getting angry because she thinks Emily Co's lying to her, but Emily Co's actually telling the truth. And it's interesting how Emily Co says living dolls are able to move, so it stands to reason that stuffed toys could too. And I feel like that could be foreshadowing to that thing I talked about before of like Soot controlling like the doll somehow. But yeah, then it moves. But I wonder why it moves. Like, is Kate doing that like subconsciously, or is somebody else doing that? And like Kate has now found out about this. Like, what if it was a hint? You know what I mean? Like, what if it is like the Hunger Games? You know how in the Hunger Games sponsors can send you tools so you can live? Like, I think in one of the Hunger Games movies, Katniss gets medicine from a sponsor. Like, what if they decided like the Scorch was put there as an obstacle, but what if this is like another shadow helping Kate out so they would get on the right track? It is the power of our Lord Grandfather that breathes life into living dolls. Dolls and toys couldn't possibly move on their own, right? So again, like this is sort of hinting at that idea like, oh, maybe like the dolls are made out of soot or something, like soot to be controlled, but I think that they are human. I think that this is, again, just a little propaganda. Then perhaps you too have a great power, Mistress Kate. I think that it's not a great power, like in the sense that it's like rare, because Kate is like, hey, let's not tell anyone about this. I don't think that like Kate's gonna be like special and like rival grandfather or something. I think that all shadows can do this, especially because we see the adults doing it, right? Like with that little like bird. I think that they're supposed to figure out how to do it for the debut. I genuinely think so. I do like this scene because, you know, they explain like, oh yeah, it's filled with the soot. Never mind, just clean up, yes ma'am. And then Kate, it seems like she's thinking. It seems, again, that anime expression, like she's thinking about it. So she's like, oh, you're weird, right? She sort of brushes her off, but then like the wheels are turning, like why's the soot moving, right? Like the gears are turning in her head. Soot is emitted due to negative feelings. That's why Scorches begin moving with ill intent. But soot can be made to move on purpose like Mistress Kate did, right? And so I feel like that this soot will be okay just because it wasn't ill intent soot. It was just like, I don't know, regular soot, I guess. Maybe it was like sad soot as opposed to like murderous soot. And so maybe, you know, but soot can move. Yeah, and so why can Mistress Kate make soot move? And that phantom we saw was someone making it move. Like, this to me is like blatant foreshadowing. Like, I feel like that they're basically telling us that yes, somebody was making it move. It was a test. And the lords in the other wing of the house, right? And so we see the lords at the end of this episode and they're being shady. And so it's interesting that she brings up the lords, but then she shakes her head and says, living dolls must feel nothing but loyalty towards the Shadows family, as if she was about to say something unloyal about the lord. Now she also says, I mustn't threat over trivial matters. And so that could be the aspect too, like, oh, don't think about the lords. We're not supposed to think about that, right? But I do feel like, that was a very interesting thing, like that she would talk about the loyalty first versus threatening over trivial matters, because what would she be thinking about the lords that's unloyal? Could she have been saying that the lords were the ones making the Scorches? I think that's what Emily Co almost just figured out. Yeah, and so Kate's doing a great job. Yeah, so she's controlling it, but only for a short time, right? And so I feel like that, again, you have that lady with the bird. What if, you know, you can do it for a longer time? I can't wait to tell the other living dolls what you can do. So she was about to tell, but Kate's like, no. And I feel like that's not necessarily because, like, again, like, oh, Kate would be targeted because she's not supposed to have that power. Only Lord Grandfather could have that power. I think that, like, she may be worried about something like that, but it's more about information exchange. Like, if the other shadows know that, they'll be more equipped for the debut, maybe, right? And so she's like, Shadows lore says nothing about such things. We must be careful, right? So I feel like the must be careful part is very like maybe Kate is special. Like maybe Kate's not supposed to be able to do this. But again, you have the adults that prove otherwise, right? So she may think it's like something bad could happen to her if she has this power, but I actually think that that would ascend her faster, that she would be seen more as an asset. But if you tell everyone else about that, that could affect your standing. And so maybe Kate is thinking a little strategically, like, Emily Co, don't tell Lou, or else Lou's Shadow Master is going to figure out how to do that, and then we will not survive. We could be discarded. She's still thinking about what Sarah said about being useful to Lord Grandfather, about shadows being discarded. She doesn't want, like, the whole town. She doesn't want all the debut, like, nominees to know that, like, this is a thing, and, like, they may need to know that for the debut, like, keeping that, like, knowledge close to your chest, right? The debut draws near and there's so much to learn, but shadows mustn't leave their rooms before then. We must study using the books we have. So I guess that's all of the stuff she was reading. Living dolls are allowed to gather, but not shadows. That's right. But we could learn more from one another by exchanging information. So see, Kate's thinking strategically, and maybe that, like, soot control will be information exchanged later, but you don't tell everybody everything, right, without getting something in return. I think that's the point. And so then they basically talk about beginning their studies tomorrow, right? There's this very cute scene of, like, you know, I guess Emily goes, like, wobbling. She's tired and Kate grabs her. I thought that was really cute. How many candidates remain? We must call the failed fruit fast with haste. So that's what I'm saying. How many candidates remain? Nothing's happened yet. The debut hasn't happened yet. So I think that why are they talking about candidates remaining, right? Like, why would they be talking about that? Because they were culling failed fruit during the Scorch scene. They did the Scorch on purpose to, like, get rid of some of the dolls or their shadows or something. So I feel like how many candidates remain? Like, that's out of the pool that hasn't even debuted yet. Right? Like, that's what makes sense to me. They're not talking about the debut. They're talking about, hey, how many candidates remain after we did the Scorch stuff? How many are still alive? How many survived that, right? Because if they died, they failed. Or if they got hurt, maybe they failed. What if we never see Rosemary again? Right? Because they're saying, like, who failed? How many candidates remain? We must call the failed fruit. Like, what if Rosemary's failed fruit because she got infected with the Soot Sickness? Now, the question would be why they let her, right, go back instead of just getting rid of her, right, when they had the chance. I don't know, but I feel like if a doll got more serious injuries than the Soot Sickness and they were pre-debut, they could have been on the chopping block. Or what if a debut doll, like pre-debut doll, got Soot Sickness? Like, maybe Rosemary was prioritized to be saved because she already debuted, whereas, like, the candidates for the debut, if they got sick or if they got hurt, they're done. You know, that's it. Let us hope it's as fun as last time. That sort of worries me, because I feel like that, like, they may get rid of the shadows in, like, a torturous, not very funky, fresh way. You know what I mean? Like, what if they, like, enjoy, like, killing the shadows, and then that power, like, goes back into them, like, the soot from that shadow comes back into them somehow. Edward, how goes the debut preparation, right? And so here's what's interesting is that these are all, like, nobles. I'm assuming this is, like, Lord Grandfather, right? But Edward's shadow is not up here. So Edward's shadow seems to be, again, 3rd floor or something, right? All shall be ready soon. And so you have him and, like, 2 other people that we see in the OP. Please leave it to me. So these are dolls doing the debut. And so those are 2 separate things. How many candidates remain? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Also, Edward, how's the debut going, right? Like, those are 2 separate thoughts. And so I feel like the Scorch thing was, like, a culling, you know? And now they ask, oh, well, how's the debut preparation going, by the way? The debut, it's my big chance now that I've been chosen as a judge. I will give the 3rd floor lords a show they won't forget. And so I feel like that is that. So I feel like that maybe I was wrong in the sense that there's, like, okay, so there's basement. Veiled dolls are basement. 1st floor is, like, medical and, like, that sort of gardener thing that I talked about earlier. 2nd floor is, like, these people. Like, these 3 people are 2nd floor and so are their shadows. 3rd floor is where Lord Grandfather is. And so maybe I was wrong in that sense because I think I said 4 floors. So I think that the highest is 3. And then we probably have 2. It's basically like Snowpiercer, right? Like, it's basically like the basement's the tail, then 1, 2, 3. First, like, I guess in, like, the other way order. But, like, 3rd class is 1st floor. 2nd class is 2nd floor. And 3rd floor is 1st class. Anyway, sorry for the headache. The candidates are of no consequence, right? So this is the candidates for the debut. How many candidates remain? Why would candidates be getting rid of, like, before the debut unless the candidates were gotten rid of through the Scorch scene, right? So he's saying the candidates are no consequence. The candidates for the debut, those are the same candidates referred to earlier. And so I feel like that, yeah, that was a culling on purpose. But the question I have, why are the candidates of no consequence? I think it's just because, like, he doesn't give a shit because he's worried about, like, oh, I've been chosen as a judge. I'm going to put on a show. Who the fuck cares about who's the candidates for this year? It's about making me look good so I can rise up. That's how I sort of feel, I guess. What matters is that this goes as I planned. And so he has plans to basically rise up and everything. And so it'll be interesting to see what those plans are, because right now I can't really think of anything other than, like, the shadow test that I talked about earlier. I think it's about, like, if it's giving a show, I wonder if it's like defeat the Scorch, battle royale, like sort of medieval times, fighting, I don't know. But yeah, and so that'll be interesting, because it seems like maybe this debut is going to be different than previous ones, because he's like, what matters is that this goes as I planned. I have plans to rise up. I have plans to give a good show. It's going to be different. It's going to be unique. And I'm really excited to see that. So yeah, that is it from me, guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed my discussion. And I will see you guys in the next one. I'm really, really satisfied with this episode, and I cannot wait to get into, like, the debut stuff. I feel like we have, like, 2 more episodes until the debut. I feel like that if this is 13 episode anime, I feel like that by episode 6, debut time will start. That's my guess. And so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you later. Bye!